lived at this property for 42 years, almost 43, and my husband and I came out on a four-wheeler into a farm field when we selected the lot, and everything that we have now on this property was planted by us. And we definitely had a plan. We took landscape classes from the Cooperative Extension, planted our trees first, and have been landscaping for many years. However, after 42 years, things change. Some of the trees have gotten so large that I have very little full sun anymore. And we've had to replace some things that, as you'll see when I'm touring the yard. So just be aware that gardens are never done. They're always changing, they're always evolving. I've asked people when I used to select gardens for a garden tour, would you like to be on the tour? And they would say, oh, not this year. I'm planning to do this, this, and this. But the reality is no one's ever done. It's always a process, and that's just the reality of gardening. The things change is my winged euonymus, which now shouldn't be planted at all because it's become an invasive, has sort of overgrown the site. If this was allowed to just grow, it would be 30 feet tall. So every year I dramatically cut this back and have developed a little garden underneath in the semi-sunny situation. And as you notice, they're tree forms. I've pruned my euonymus myself to become like a little tree. And that's one way that this was planted 42 years ago. And so as they've grown up, clearly they overgrew the site. So you don't always have to remove. Sometimes a good pair of pruning shears can allow you to prolong the life of shrubs in your garden. A grove that my husband and I started with little whips from the Soil and Water Conservation. I think we paid $10 for 10 trees 42 years ago. And the spruce have overgrown the site. We like the wind block. We didn't want to totally take it away, but we took away all of the grove, about 2/3 of the grove as you go down there. And now we have a spot for a shed that we've always wanted. The problem with the trees getting too large was that this is a glorious sugar maple with the best fall color imaginable. And the spruce were really growing into the maple. I don't think they would have killed it, but they took away from the beauty of the tree. So we had to say this tree has priority over the spruce grove, which we planted originally for privacy and for a windbreak in the winter. And then I like edges, so I've always had a few of the lambs here as an edge, and these obviously are no longer on the edge of anything. So I'll be moving them up along the grass line. One thing that we did also, that if you have this opportunity, the professional tree service that came and did the removal of the spruce took most of the chips, but we had them intentionally leave 2 big piles of chips because with jumping worms, I'm nervous about mulch. So now we're going to have our own mulch that we know is sanitary. And when I'm finished all the renovation that I've been working on, we'll have clean mulch to put down, and you'll see some of it in progress as we walk around. Because we live in an area in which we have our own septic and well, I wanted something to screen that. So I put up tiger eye sumac. As the ash tree, it masked my well. It's late to emerge in the spring. So I have these kind of ugly shoots in the spring. So I have underplanted with Virginia bluebells, forget-me-nots, and some species tulips that bloom really early. They're all ephemeral, meaning they lose their leaves after the blooming period is done. So I have all these spring ephemerals masking the ugly trunks in the early spring, and just when the tiger eye sumac comes out, it masks the foliage of the ephemerals before they completely die away. It's a good companion planting. 3 years ago, we decided to go ahead and put solar panels on the roof of our house. And as we did that, we were so concerned about the trees to the south. And what we found out from All Energy Solar is that our trees to the south are perfectly fine, but our eastern and western trees were shading too much. So we had the tree service dramatically cut back this ash tree so that we get full solar in the afternoon. And as a result, what was once a lovely shade garden under here has become full sun. And I've been working on replanting it. And so I've chosen plants like lavender and cat's mint that will really take the hot, and today's almost 100 degrees, so despite the fact that I'm watering. You can see a little wilting going on. We're to gather these stones, and we are building this path. As you see, it's not real easy to walk on yet. It will be filled in with some gravel in between the stepping stones. But this, I like being able to get out into my garden. These are 42-year-old crabapple trees, and we used to just have grass under them, but it became a battle just to keep the grass alive because it's shaded all of the time, and even shade grass with the roots coming up from the crabapples became difficult to manage. So I'm moving hostas. I just picked up some Russian cypress, shade-loving evergreens, and one of my new favorite plants that you'll see in a couple places are the low-growing dogwood shrubs that grow in the shade, grow in the sun, wherever you want them to grow. But I'm developing this into a hosta grove. So as soon as this is done blooming, I'll move it and plant my rhododendron there because, again, it gets some filtered sun in the afternoon, morning shade. We have a culvert that drains from the other side of the road, and in the spring melt-off, this would sometimes just be a river on a really hot March day when the sun was really causing the snow to melt quickly. So we built a dry creek bed. Little did we know that that was popular. That was a term no one ever heard of 40 years ago. And in front of the culvert, I developed Pachysandra, which isn't necessarily my favorite, but in this situation, it's so functional because if we get a really hot spring day and the water's really flowing out of the culvert, it won't stay in the dry creek bed. It'll come right through the Pachysandra, which acts as an amazing filter. We get no gravel, we get no sand that reaches beyond the reaches of this Pachysandra. And I just control the size of it to keep it from taking over where I don't want it. When the Pachysandra gets really out of control, where it's close to other plants, I wait till after a rain and come out with a pitchfork and physically pull it up. But the roots of it are like a Brillo pad, and they're really tough. So where it grows out into the stone walkway, that is a situation where I will use a little Roundup to control. It's such an aggressive plant that I can spray the edge, and even if it takes out the very edge of the Pachysandra within a few weeks, it is back and robust and killed out where I don't want it. I don't use a lot of chemicals, but I think there are places where you need to use that. And what I use is a child's toy snow shovel with a big wide blade as a shield, so that I'm very certain not to get any of the Roundup sprayed in places where I don't want it. And of course I do it in the evening when there's no breeze. So I don't use a lot of garden chemicals, but there are times when I think it is appropriate to use something like Roundup on a small scale to control an out-of-control plant, especially when it's functional as that Pachysandra. You might notice these paper plates on the ground. I have a very noxious weed that has started up in my garden called horsetail that's almost impossible to eradicate. So I cut a hole in the paper, a slit, and I have sheltered each individual one, and I'm trying to kill it out with something called sedgehammer. Not looking like I'm having a lot of success. I might try one more dose of it, or spurge is another one. I want to try to kill it because I believe in killing a noxious weed like that back to the roots rather than just digging it, because the roots of this go on forever and ever, and it is truly a noxious weed. So I'm trying to use the fewest number of chemicals possible and yet be reasonable about not wanting something to take over in my garden. And it's always a process. It's a rare occasion that you can say everything's in control in my garden, and it's never finished. It is a process and something that I enjoy, and I hope I've shared some of that enthusiasm with you as well.